3, 2, 1.
Who's ready for some knowledge?
Just so I know how loud or soft we are, everybody in the back, can hear? Good. So far, so good. All right. The presentation is in process, so let's get started.
It's in progress too.
What did I say?
Process.
Ah, shut up. My name is Patrick Hine.
My name is Nate McCarrick. We are here with QSYS to talk about the QSYS ecosystem.
So just at a show of hands, shoot your hand up if you've ever...
Shut your hand up.
No, shoot your hand up.
Oh, I see.
What is your awareness of the QSYS ecosystem? On a scale of 1 to 10, is it I am fully aware and I don't know why I'm sitting here, or I want to learn everything?
Are you asking their hands to be a scale of 1 to 10?
Yeah, I don't know.
A hand is a yes or no question, Patrick.
That's a really good point.
Who's very familiar with QSYS? A hand. Oh,
perfect.
I said a handful, and that was actually a pretty good pun. I just want to compliment myself on
that.
So
for most of you, this might be new to you. We're going to go over like a 50,000-foot view of the QSYS ecosystem. We're here to answer any questions along the way. So again, shoot your hand up if you have any of them. And if there's no further questions, let's get started.
So let's talk about what the world is in regards to an AV and C platform, audio, video, and control. And I feel like I've got a little bit of warbling going on. I apologize if I'm going to stand over here a little bit better. Is that better?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. As far as an integrated platform goes, historically speaking, that means you're taking a bunch of disparate people from different manufacturers and you're forcing them to talk to each other. So you've got one company that makes audio, one company that makes video, company that makes the control, and you're forcing all these programming links that just weren't designed to work that way.
That's right, and if you are an integrator in this day and age, you know that your new customer is that IT person who is not used to some of this hardware, so they'll take a look at the audio processors and the video processors, and they're like, why doesn't this work on my network like the rest of my stuff, and why doesn't it scale like a server scales, and why can't I connect all of this audio video control to a central monitoring system so I can look at all of the endpoints like the rest of my rooms?
And that's the way that we would build it if we were going to build this from the ground up today, right? The reason that it exists like this is because over the years, companies that specialized in different areas had to talk to each other. But if you wanted to do it, a brain experiment of what the proper way to do it is, it would be one ecosystem that controls everything. It's built to work together.
Right.
And that's what QSYS is.
So the QSYS ecosystem, again, is a connected audio, video, and control platform. And first and foremost, it is built on standard hardware and uses standard networking protocols, and it does connect to other IT platforms. And we're going to go over all of this at a very high level, but the main thing you should take away from this slide is that the more you engage in the QSYS ecosystem, the more value you're going to draw from it. These are not disparate components. These are pieces that are designed to deliver a solution that is better than the sum of their parts.
And the reason for that is we use hypothetical mathematics like 1 + 1 = 3. We've broken the way that math works in the rest of the world and use... No, that's not what does that mean?
No, it means that the more you use the ecosystem, the greater the value will be.
I see.
Come on, Nate. So if you haven't seen how our system looks, at the heart of the system is the core processor. Again, everything is networked, so it's all running through a standard networking switch, and then you have your different endpoints. And this is kind of where the value of QSC and QSYS comes into play, because we look at ourselves primarily as a software company at this point, and we also make very specific endpoints. But you're going to see that as we go down this journey, we are going to start differentiating ourselves as a software provider, and by using things like third-party providers to provide the processing, where we can't build a better processor than Dell, for example, or we can't build a better switch than Dell. So why even try? So that's kind of where we're standing here, and then we'll go over in greater detail our remote monitoring and management solution. But this 50,000-foot view, that's what the system looks like.
Yeah, so let's take a look at each of those sections and what it means to integrate them together. As far as processing goes, like Patrick just mentioned, we are using standard network protocols. We're using Intel as our processing. We're using Linux as a operating system because these have been designed in a way to work at a level that we want them to work at. We're not going to do better than they are, so we're using a version of Linux that was designed with radar systems involved, that is time-sensitive, precise, that works perfectly for audio as well.
Right. Let's kind of unpeel the onion here and talk a little bit about what we mean by software-based and how we're able to achieve that. Because we're using things like Intel processors, we have this enormous amount of processing headroom. So here's a little example of a DSP chain that we use just to kind of exemplify how much processing power we actually have. It's a very basic signal chain, and the goal of this experiment was how many of these signal chains can we load into each of these processors, essentially before we break it, before it fails to compile.
And these are things that any DSP can do. An EQ, a crossover, everyone can do that. We're not trying to prove anything with this signal chain. It's just an example of things that every DSP is capable of doing.
That's right. So if you look at some of our competitors, it starts to ratchet up with the more money you're spending on their processors. But then you get to our smallest processor, and you're already almost in line with one of our competitors' largest processor. And then you ratchet up one more time and one more time. It almost looks like we're lying.
If it came down to pure processing power, if power was your only check mark, we win hands down across the board. It's stupid. It looks like we're lying. It's just stupid. In fact, I just want to point it out. There's an error on this slide. If you look at the graph over here, 3,300 is up here. So it's actually a little bit higher than it even shows right there. Patrick made this slide, so I have to point out his
errors. I made it on the plane for you, so stop complaining, Nate. The reason I show you that slide is not just to boast about how many signals we can put into this kind of useless signal chain test. We say this because we want to exemplify how much processing headroom we can do and what we can do with that processing power. So for example, back when we introduced Q-SYS in 2009, we didn't have echo cancellation. But in 2014, we introduced software-based echo cancellation. We did it at a software level. You just push the firmware up, and basically everybody that had invested in the platform back in 2009 up until 2014 got echo cancellation for free.
Whereas other companies would have to then sell you an additional chip to make that possible. Now, that experience with AEC is one thing, and it's an example of how we do it every single stage. We have so many things we continue to add into the processing system because we have that headroom that we saw on the previous slide.
That's right. We'll talk a little bit about this a little later, but again, our implementation of control, our implementation of software-based Dante, again, all of this is happening at software level, and it's because we've got the power to do so.
We have the power! Power!
Here's a look at some of our tiers. Depending on how many ins and outs you need, that's how you're deciding which processor you're choosing. It's important to note, though, that you're using the same software for all of these tiers. So you're never learning more than one piece of software. If you're building the smallest conference room to the biggest theme park in the world, it's the same software. And in fact, if you're ratcheting up from a small room to a medium-sized room, all you're doing is changing the processor in the software. You're not having to redo all of your control programming or all your DSP. It's a very simple exercise.
Yeah, same features all the way up. And you'll probably notice that is not a QSC logo on our biggest core there, right? That is a Dell logo. Well, we were the first ones to decouple our software from the hardware and realize, hey, at a certain level, at an enterprise level, there are already processors out there that the IT department is used to working with that are way more powerful and field tested than what we can build. So we said, let's just put our software on theirs, and it works much better.
That's right. If you're interested in seeing this, by the way, if you look right around the corner, I think this is on display, and it's running a couple things in this booth right now.
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about networking.
Who loves to talk about networking?
There are two kinds of people.
Look at this captured audience who talk about networking.
They love networking. I mean, we've got something for you folks, but there are folks that do like networking and they're comfortable with networking. We have solutions for you. Basically, if your switch has been made in the last few years, we have instructions on how you can load Q-SYS onto basically any network on the planet. All you need to do is configure a little bit of quality of service, and if you're comfortable with the back end of a network, you can do so. You don't have to use a proprietary network switch to use Q-SYS.
But if you're like a normal human and you don't want to deal with that networking problems, we have switches that are just nice and plug-and-play options. So you can just, hey, open up this NS series switch. It is configured to work with Q-SYS already. If you have the ability to run a network that is separate from the installation's previous existing network, if one already exists, that's a great option to make it just, you open it up and it works.
And again, you might have noticed, again, this is not a Q-SYS switch. This is a Dell switch. We basically just partnered with Dell. They're pre-configured out of the box and ready to use when you're ready.
So let's talk about audio. When it comes to audio, we like to say we're I/O agnostic or audio agnostic. We don't care how the audio gets into the QSYS environment. As long as it gets there, we treat it the same way. An audio channel is an audio channel. Whether it's coming in through an analog port that's on the QSYS core or a peripheral device, whether it's coming in through a native network, something like Dante, AES67, or our own QLAN network, or whether it's coming in from an edge network like CobraNet and AVB. As soon as it gets to us, it's all the same.
A few months ago, we introduced, or we made the announcement about software-based Dante. Again, we're preaching the software message. This is a great implementation of that. Prior to this, you had to use a card-based solution to get Dante into the QSYS ecosystem. In February, when this launches, you will be able to engage with Dante with just a simple software license. Connect it to the network, and it's basically a native input for QSYS. And here's a little bit what it looks like inside the software. We have been preaching how you only need to use one software. This is another implementation of that. So in other instances, you might need to use Dante controller to get things into a given DSP. You never have to leave QSYS Designer software in order to get Dante into your thing. If you want to use Dante controller, you still can, but you don't have to with QSYS. And the last bit that is pretty exciting for us is that, again, there's no additional hardware. It's just a licensed thing. And you only have to license however many channels you actually need. So if you only need 8x8, then you should just license 8x8. And there's no hardware to install. There's no person that you need to put in the field to get it going. You can log in remotely, turn it on, and it's ready to go.
Let's talk about...
Do it.
Our lack of advancement on our slides. So not every slide advancer in the world is created equally. Some of them don't have batteries. Some of them require a man to walk physically around the backside of a presentation and hit it several times with what I would guess is probably a hammer. We can also talk about intrinsic correction. So intrinsic correction is an advantage you get whenever you are dealing with QSYS amplifiers and loudspeakers inside the ecosystem. So we can work fine with other amplifiers and loudspeakers. That's fine. Use whatever you want. But if you choose to use all of ours, then you get our own native tuning. So we have sent our own amps and loudspeakers through the ringer in our testing facilities over and over again. We know the proper way to tune those so that we have a nice flat signal coming out of the system, and intrinsic correction will automatically be applied so that you do not need to do your own tuning on them.
Right, you're only tuning for the room, you're not tuning for the gear.
Right.
Oh, it's working now.
Okay.
Yay, all right. Oh, nope, it's not. Now it just...
we can just
Let's
guess.
go one back.
We can guess what these slides are about.
Well, I know what they're about. This slide is about NV series. So we're very excited to introduce video distribution native on the QSYS ecosystem. So this is the NV series right here. It is a 3 input by 2 output. This is a software definable piece. You're not seeing a encoder and a decoder. You define this in the software, which again, if you're carrying inventory, it means that there's one less piece that you need to have local in your stock.
Now this is real size, I want to mention. So you do need a forklift every time you do want to install one of those
very, very
to an
heavy.
environment.
Yes. Let's talk a little bit about shift. If your IT folks are worried about putting video on the network, this is very sensitive to those folks. And again, this is a meeting room specific device. It is very specific for that. So if you think about the kind of content that is in most meeting rooms, it's Excel stuff, it's PowerPoint, and it's soft codec calling. This is actually a perfect example. This is a PowerPoint, and this is not refreshing a whole lot, so it's not requiring a lot of bandwidth on our codec.
Yeah,
our
the shift codec, well, I'm sorry.
No,
it literally looks at every single frame as it comes by, and it says if there is change, then I'm going to refresh that, and if there's not change on a pixel by pixel basis, then it's not going to refresh it. So that's why the bandwidth drops so significantly when you have static content like this.
That's right, but make no mistake, you don't have to compromise on quality when you have full motion video. All it does is sense that there is full motion video, and then it will use the necessary bandwidth that you've set the threshold at. And that's the other thing to remember, is that if there is a certain threshold that you don't want it to breach, you just set that threshold and it will adjust automatically.
Yep. Let's talk about control. So obviously, a whole third of this entire platform is the fact that we can control it. Everything is natively built inside of the QSYS software. It knows how to talk to each other. The old way of doing things would have been 1,000 different connections between all these different disparate components, right? The control processor has to be programmed how to talk to the audio processor, how to talk to the touchscreen controllers. And all of those are possible failure points, and all of that is a waste of your programmer's time because it can just be summed up so much easier if you're using one platform that is designed to do that.
Yeah, so this, oh, bye. I think it's actually working, Matt. I'm good. So this is what our solution is. Rather than having to program the audio processor to talk to the control processor, why not make it an integrated piece? So it's one less piece of failure, and you can use, as the integrator, you can use your time to create better experiences rather than doing the minutia that is required to talk to control programmers and audio controls.
Yeah. Of course, we integrate with as many possible things as we can. That's the whole point, is that we know that we're not going to be able to create every single endpoint that you need in that meeting room or whatever installation you have is. So the ability for us to open ourselves up and speak with other manufacturers is critical.
Yeah, this comes in a couple different flavors for QSYS.
It comes in grape, it comes in cherry, and pretty soon lemon lime.
Delicious.
Yeah.
No, what I'm talking about is universal interoperability. So no matter what soft codec you're using in that meeting room, we interface with it via standard USB. So there's no drivers that you need to install. And again, we actually just announced a couple different integrations. Recently, there is now a Zoom Rooms plugin that you can engage with. We are certified for Google Hangouts Meet. So lots of ways that you can introduce QSYS with the soft codec.
There are also a ton of third-party manufacturers out there that we want to integrate into QSYS. We have a plugin library. So you have one of those devices, you can find that plugin in our asset manager and just add it into your designer as if it is a native QSYS peripheral. And that plugin library grows every single day. We've got people working and writing plugins constantly. And if you need a specific plugin, you feel free to contact, maybe even tag, and maybe they can even write that plugin for you.
That's right. And as a manufacturer, we are only as good as our partners, and we have some of the best partners in the business. I already spoke about both of these. We have a partnership with Google. We just introduced software-based Dante, a partnership that we introduced with Autonate. So again, because we have this open API, it allows us to engage with basically anyone with a network connection.
So let's look at the final piece of this puzzle, is the ability to monitor and manage it remotely. So it's one thing to have everything working fine in the venue, but then you need someone off-site to be able to look into that system and make sure that it's functioning properly, send in the right help when something does go wrong, and that is what the Reflect Enterprise Manager does.
Yeah, let's say you've got a university with a bunch of different cores all over the place. Let's say that each classroom has its own core, and you want to be able to watch the entirety of your system, not just one system, and monitor that health and send the help when you need it. That's basically what QSYS Reflect is going to allow you to do. You only have to register your core with Reflect, and the core brings all of that peripheral information with it. And that's not just QSYS peripherals. That's every third-party device that has a plugin for QSYS is going to report back to QSYS Enterprise Manager.
Now, trivia question, Enterprise Manager, this is not the very first Enterprise Manager. Does anybody know who the first Enterprise Manager was?
Please
His name was Captain James T. Kirk, first manager of the Enterprise. Thank you very much. I'll be here all day.
Nobody's laughing or clapping.
I am enjoying myself very much.
That was terrible.
And I'm more important than anyone.
Let's talk
in my mind.
Let's talk a little bit about how the ways you can engage with Enterprise Manager. Of course, you can use our GUI this is just a standard web browser, and you can see the integrity of the entire system. Or if you have an IT administrator that wants to see the entirety of the enterprise, not just the audio, video control, but everything on a single dashboard. And he's already got things like Splunk and SolarWind. When it becomes available, our API will be able to interface with basically any IT-level enterprise management service that has an API available.
Now, what does this mean for you? That means a couple things. Obviously, one of the things is you're reducing the costs of supporting that system, right? You know what kind of person to send in and fix something when something does go wrong. The information that you get from the enterprise manager will tell you if it's the difference between a device that's broken or it's a cable that's unplugged, right? You don't want to send your really expensive guy in there just to plug a cable in when you might get information that says you just need to send someone in and press the right button.
Right, and And if you're looking to reduce the amount of people that you send in, there might be things in that room that you can address right from your desk. So let's imagine that you've got a classroom in a university and they just don't know how to lower the projection screen because they don't know how to read that GUI. You could, from the comfort of your desk, be able to interface with anything that they see on their UCI remotely without putting boots on the ground. You've addressed their problem, and you've saved money in sending people out there in the field.
Yeah, which also means ultimately that you are increasing your system's uptime. That's the whole point of profitability of your system, right? It's got to run when you need it to run. So the more it's up and running, the better everyone's experience is going to be. The ability to restore your system remotely from that cloud is one of the main things we provide. You can also, when you get a new device, you can upload that system to that device as well. It saves a lot of people running into the building to fix things.
That's right. If you want to see Q-SYS Reflect in action, it's right around the corner over there. I think we're monitoring a couple things in this booth right now, and we can trigger faults and we can show you what that looks like. But I think we have reached the conclusion. If there are any questions that you have, shoot your hand up.
They can be questions either about Q-SYS or Captain Picard, one of the two. I will answer either one.
No, we're not going to do that.
I'll answer any question about... Yes?
What's the color depth of your video system?
Color depth of the video system.
It's 444. Yep. The question was how many bits is it? 16-bit color. Yeah. It's 444 60, 16-bit color.
Good question. Who's got a better question? Anyone?
Nobody? All right.
We're doing competitions.
It is always dynamic.
Can you repeat the question? I couldn't hear.
Yeah, so the question was, for NV series, can you keep it at a static bit rate, or is it always dynamic? It is always dynamic.
Correct.
But you can set thresholds. You can say, I don't want it breaching 800 megabytes or whatever, or megabits.
Anyone else? If you do have questions, feel free to grab us after this. Obviously, we don't need to answer them all in a group environment like this. Grab us, talk to us. We're here all day, all week long.
Thanks, guys.